welcome everyone and good afternoon. Wow, what an opportunity to be standing in front of you and announcing officially that the Australian Open is going to go ahead 3 weeks later than its normal date, starting on February the 8th through until February the 21st. And there's been many times over the past 8 months where that would have been in doubt, but it's through the commitment of the Premier, the current Victorian government, as well as the persistence of the Tennis Australia team, of which I'm incredibly proud, as well as the support of the players, that's got us to a point where today I can stand in front of you and say February the 8th is our start date. The players will arrive in Australia on January the 15th and 16th and participate in a 2-week quarantine program, and then coming out of that at the end of January, and then like they do for every other Grand Slam around the world, we'll play a series of warm-up events. So every player will have an opportunity to play at least one warm-up event leading into the Australian Open, and then hopefully here in the next few weeks we'll be able to announce additional events following the Australian Open. This is a magnificent opportunity for the international playing group. It's a magnificent opportunity for the people of Melbourne and Victoria and Australia. We have now a chance to showcase our ability as the major events capital of the world, as well as our capability on delivering these events in what is a very challenging time for all of us. We're going to provide the necessary assurances that the quarantine environment will remain one of the safest places in the world to be, and our primary objective is to ensure that the community is protected as well as the players themselves. And that's why we're going to all lengths of action to ensure from the time that they leave, wherever they are around the world, to the time that they arrive, and the 2 weeks that they stay in quarantine, and then they come out, that we're in a position to deliver the Australian Open. The entries today and early next week will be closing for the Australian Open, and to this point, we have a commitment from every single player in the world to be in Australia. And that's a magnificent position to be in here just before the Christmas season. Obviously, as everyone knows, that it's the beginning of the season, so anything can happen with that entry list, but the commitment is there. So this is a great opportunity. We can, of course, showcase Melbourne, Victoria, and Australia to over 1 billion people around the world for that 2-week period. And we would not have got that opportunity, as I said at the beginning, again, without the commitment of the Premier of Victoria, as well as the persistence of our entire team and organisation, including yourselves. So thanks for this opportunity to officially announce that, and it's been a long time coming, and we're happy to be able to stand in front of you and let you know that detail. So on that, I'll open it up for questions. Yeah, that's a good question. So when the players arrive, they will come. We are chartering flights from around the world, and so the players, before they get on any flight, will have to test negative within a 48-hour window. When they arrive, they'll receive another test, which will have to be negative. They remain in their hotel rooms until they have those 2 negative tests, at least. And then it's a modified quarantine environment through a high level of security. They will be transported from the hotel, which is only assigned hotels for the players only, and will be brought to the courts for no more than 5 hours a day. There'll be several windows during the course of each day, and for 14 days they'll be able to do that. They'll only be able to go between the hotel room and the courts under high secure environment. And there'll be consistent tests right throughout that 2-week period. They'll have to continually show negative tests in that period as well. And anytime a player is positive, they will be then isolating in their room for 14 days. The way we have structured the quarantine, and we're happy to share with those details because there's a tremendous amount of detail. We've worked very closely with health here in Victoria, and both all levels of government be magnificent to work with. And together with them have designed an environment that ensures safety. But the players will work in cohorts. So like the first week, for example, a player will only be signed one other player that they can practice with. They cannot intermingle with any other cohort. So you may see across the site many different gyms because they cannot jointly use gyms, for example, when they're doing their preparation. It's critically important. We would not be in a position to run the Australian Open if the players had to stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks. They would not be prepared, and we would not get the field of play that we're anticipating and getting. So this is a modified environment that we work closely with the Victorian government on, It's also important to note it has zero impact on Australians wanting to return home. We are bringing in these players through charter flights from around the world and putting them into this quarantine environment. After the first week, they increase the size of the cohort by a couple more, but it does give them an opportunity then to hit with someone a bit different so that they can be fully prepared going into the next 3 to 4 weeks of tennis here in Australia. It'll be the first time since March, since we all went into lockdown with COVID, that around the world we'll be able to run an event in an environment where we'll have crowds in the stadium, and the players would have traveled this distance, completed a quarantine and a safety period, and then come out and be able to compete for 3 to 4 weeks. And there'll be over $80 million of prize money available over that 4-week period, of which the Australian Open itself is $71 million. Crowds. Yeah, and that's, again, the crowds, it's an forever changing position and number, but we fully expect to welcome at least 50% to what we have previously had. Potentially, depending on what's happening in the community, obviously anything can change, and we'll be fully aware of that and ready to change that any changes we need to make in preparation for that. But we do expect to have good crowds, and in fact, next week we will be going next Wednesday we'll be going in official ticket sales, and hopefully just before Christmas we give our fans an opportunity to buy a nice Christmas present for their family and friends. And then, of course, we've got now the whole month of January to do the same, because we only start on February the 8th. One thing I didn't mention, the number of players coming into Australia, it'll be 100% of all the players in the main draw, but we will not be bringing the qualifying players into Australia. So that's another 256 players will not be coming, but we are still going to host the qualifying, and that is January the 10th through the 13th. The women will play in Dubai, and the men will play in Doha. And it's a magnificent opportunity for them to compete for several millions of dollars in prize money. And the top 16 players, both on the women and the top 16 on the men, will then get on the charter flight and travel to Melbourne to be in the main draw. We wanted to ensure that all 560 players, we provide an opportunity to compete for the Australian Open, and half that group will compete outside of Australia. So they still get an opportunity to earn prize money, earn points, and play the Australian Open. So our good friends in Dubai, as well as in Doha, have partnered with us on what we're delivering a great qualifying event as well. Every player, including Roger, has made a commitment to travel to Melbourne to play. One thing that's important to note in Roger's case, he's been injured, and he said that recently. He's been injured for most of the year and has had surgery. And we've been in touch with him and his team. And I think it's been 3 days now. He's hit for the first time in Dubai. He's in his normal training, pre-season training routine. He goes to Dubai and he spends several weeks to a month there in preparing. He did say to us he thought February the 8th was a more suitable date for him in preparing for the Australian Open. But a lot will depend on how he responds to the surgery in his next 2 to 3 weeks of training. Yeah, so we will be COVID safe with our crowds. We will be practicing what you would practice normally in the environment to ensure that there's a safe environment for the crowds to enjoy the tennis, as well as and the players to be safe as well. So when you see the seating in the stadium, our crowds will not be sitting on top of each other. And depending if you come from the same family, you can sit together, the same group, you can sit together. But they'll be spaced around all the seats, and we'll have reserved seating right across the site. The great thing about this site, and we will be making some special announcements, the government will in the coming weeks, about the new stadium court and the new broadcast centres, and while we've all been in lockdown, this building has continued to be developed, and this precinct. So we'll be practicing all those. We'll give you more details on exactly what that is and what the numbers will look like specifically, but a lot of it depend on how many people buy tickets as far as the exact number. We've been on a long journey to make sure we provide an environment that is 100% safe, not only for the players that are in the environment, but also for our community. One of the safest places in the world right now is Melbourne, is Victoria, because of what we've enjoyed over the last 50 days. But we've paid a price for that, and our families and friends have paid a price for that. So we are not going to put anyone in our state or in the country under any form of risk. So that's why we work very closely with health to create an environment that is not only safe, but allows the players to continue to prepare for the Australian Open. Now, when you get transported from the hotel to the courts, there are COVID marshals, there are the police, the Justice Department that are going to ensure that this is absolutely safe and remains in a bubble. So there'll be no breaching of that. And one thing I think is important to note, the tennis players, particularly the last 6 months, they're used to this environment. They've been traveling from the courts where they play to the hotel, and there's very strict rules both on the women's tour and the men's tour on any breaching of that. And if there's any breaching of those conditions, that player will be immediately removed from our country and as well as be fined. So they are fully aware of that because that's not different to the rules that they're adhering to around the world right now. Well, I think what's really important to note on this is that we're not impacting. We work closely with the federal government and the Victorian government. We're not impacting the Australians that want to come home and that need to come home and that can come home. The numbers that we bring into Australia are not getting on the commercial flights. They're getting on flights that we're providing, so they're not impacting those seats and those numbers at all. We're bringing them in actually from cities around the world, from Singapore, from Los Angeles, from Dubai, potentially other cities, over and above what the current cap is of Australians returning home. At any time, if we were going to impact that, of course we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. So that's why we've taken this position, and we work closely with all forms of government to ensure that Australians can still get home, and we can still deliver this event. I think it's many people have asked the question why, why run the Australian Open, and the answers in our mind is in many ways fairly straightforward, and the ministers have just recently said that as well. We have an opportunity to impact our economy, to boost the psyche of our community, and to showcase Melbourne, Victoria, Australia to the rest of the world on how we've responded and managed this virus, and how we still remain a capital city in the world that welcomes people under certain conditions. And hopefully 2021 is a year we transition to a more normal environment for all of us. And we want to make that contribution at the beginning. But we would never do it if there was a risk that would be imposed to the community or to the people of Victoria. And neither would the government. And that's why I'm only here, what's the day today? Just a few days before Christmas, making the announcement, when this announcement's generally made 3-4 months before. So, and that's why ticket sales are only going on sale just before Christmas again. So it's taken us this time to get to a point where we are making sure that everything is safe, Australians can get home, and that we can showcase then to the rest of the world what we are capable of. And I personally believe the economic impact, and our organization does, as does the state government, the economic impact that we can bring to our city and to the state is significant and shouldn't be ignored. And the psyche around what we can accomplish and achieve, obviously remaining safe, is important as well. One thing I can assure with the tickets, there will be a full range, like we've had, and our objective is to make it affordable for every Victorian, every Australian. We won't have international guests like we've enjoyed previously. So everyone coming to the Australian Open will be either from interstate, if the borders continue to remain open, or from Victoria, and mostly from Melbourne. Most of our fans come from Melbourne and Victoria anyway, and there will be an affordable range of prices. It depends. If you want to sit in the first row for the men's final, that'll be a different price than if you just want to come onto the grounds and watch some of the outside courts. We will be announcing in the coming days of how what the site will look like and the type of access that we'll have, because those details are still being worked through with the health department. At this point, there's several that are still being contracted and finalized, so we're making a specific announcement on that because we have in mind which hotels will be used, but they need to be contracted before we can make official announcement. Sorry, what is it? Yeah, that's a question I cannot answer because we're going to follow the direction of the government, and like we have all along on this journey, and they've got us to this position where we've enjoyed 50+ days of no cases. But as we've seen what's happened in Sydney over the last couple of days, anything can happen, and we'll be prepared and ready for that. And so will our patrons, so will our fans, and so will the players. Yeah, well, it's a good question because it depends on how we organize the site. But we had 840,000 people last year. So if you take 50% of the period of 15 days, um, there would be half of that. But it would likely be less than half of that because it depends how we organize the site. So um, this is not a year we're going to try and beat numbers. This is a year we're going to make sure we deliver a maximum economic impact to the city, and that we can showcase to over 1 billion people around the world that will be watching the Australian Open what we can do, what we're capable of. And again, see, the U.S. Open went ahead, the Roland Garros, the French Open, they went ahead. We're next, and then just around the corner will be Wimbledon. So what's happened in the tennis world is the Grand Slams have been the anchors and have continued to perform and deliver for the players who unfortunately have not had a great opportunity over the course of the 9 months to earn a living. And most of the players, 99% of them, have hardly made any money this year. So we're providing another opportunity for that, for the tennis community. Won't be more than 1,000. Sorry, won't be more than 1,100 because that'll include the players. There's approximately players, and every player is limited to the number of guests they can bring. So it's under 500 for the women players and under 500 for the men players. And we are, as far as the events we're running, I didn't mention that at the beginning, we're running men's and women's singles, men's and women's doubles, mixed doubles, and the wheelchair event. And the great news about the wheelchair event, we're increasing the size of the draw in the quads. We all know about the best quad player of all time, Dylan Alcott, and he was very excited when we made that decision too. So that is all the main draw. The qualifiers, as I mentioned previously, will be played overseas. Yeah, the 5 hours is advice from health. What they consider would be an acceptable time where you kind of in and out. But remember, even it's not mingling either. They'll come specifically to a court. If you and I are practicing, you'll be staying on that side, I'll be staying on that side. We won't be mingling, even though we'll be a cohort together. We'll practice together for one full week, and then we can add 2 others to our cohort, because by that point, once we pass the medium of negative tests, then we're pretty much in good shape. But we want to go at least the full 14 days under those conditions. And in those 5 hours, we'll include practicing, we'll include gym work and preparation, and the opportunity to grab a quick bite to go back to the hotel room. Players and no one, their guests, will be able to leave the hotel room. Once they go in the hotel room, they stay there, and then they order food to eat breakfast and lunch and dinner in the room. No, that's not been negative, Nancy. That's just a good question. The uh, Anything is possible. If they're in their community, if there are challenges and the government is not comfortable with people being together, we'll have an event without crowds. If that was the case, we don't expect that to be the case. Obviously, if we all do the right thing, currently we're still practicing COVID safe, and we're still reinforcing COVID safe guidelines. And us as an organization are even more aware of that than ever before. And we've just got to ensure that, as a community, as Victorians, we do that. And, then it's not just about the Australian Open. There's the Boxing Day test. There's the Australian Open. There's the Grand Prix. Imagine if we got to April and we were able to deliver a successful and safe Boxing Day test, a successful and safe Australian Open, and the same thing for the Grand Prix. That'll be a legacy that our state will forever, ever hold in the eyes of the world when it comes to sport and entertainment and generally the community, and we'll feel incredibly proud of our achievement. So this is not just about Tennis Australia. It's about the government, and it's about all Victorians and all Australians having an opportunity to do this. We wouldn't do it unless can ensure 100% safety. There have been moments. There have been moments the last 8 months, and there's been days where with the team, I'm so incredibly proud of our team. We've worked around the clock 7 days a week and have been absolute heroes in their persistence. But there have been moments as an organization we've looked at each other and said, do we really need to do this because it's been so hard? But we're fortunate. We have a leader in the state, a premier, who's stood up and committed to it from the beginning. And if you look at his comments right from the beginning, that this was an ultimate objective, provided we were in an environment that we could do it. And we've also, we have an organization, we've learned from others around the world that have done it. The US Open had a bubble that was successful, as did the French. So we've learned from other sports as well, but no one's had yet what we are going to have. and can have, and that's going to be a difference which I think we'd be proud of. But we've never wavered in our desire to get it done, and I think that's an important bit, and that's why we're standing here today announcing this officially. All the Australians, because they've already completed their 2 weeks of quarantining. So they have a magnificent opportunity. The rest of the tennis playing world will be in 2 weeks of quarantine with limited periods, and the Australians do have an advantage in training. And then I think you know we've spoken to the players a lot and their teams, because there've been a lot of questions they've asked about what's it mean, what happens in quarantining when I come out. Some of them haven't believed us. Said when you come out of quarantine, you've passed all the tests, you're COVID safe, and so you can now mingle in the community. And as it stands today, we are going to movies, we're going to restaurants, we're walking around, kids are in school, and we're very fortunate. But we're still practicing safety. So I think all the players, Serena is I know particularly excited because she's got a record to beat. Rafa and Roger, they're both on 20. Novak Djokovic has been a dominator here and has dominated the play here in Melbourne Park, and he wants to close the gap between Rafa and Roger. They're great stories. Ash Barty, #1 in the world. Can we come in and have an Australian this year, either on the women or the men's side, win the Australian Open? Because it's been a while, and since the 70s. So 77 was the last one. So I think we have. It's an exciting time. We also have some of the older players that they're nearing the end of their careers, and the younger ones have definitely closed the gap. We saw, different winners, both the U.S. Open and not Roland Garros, of course, with Rafa Nadal. He owns that event, but it's going to be exciting. They're all going to be under different environments. Now, when they travel with teams of 12 people and 16 people, that's not going to be the case anymore. It's just going to be a couple. So they have to adjust to that. No, everyone's the same. That's one thing that's great about the Australian Open. Doesn't matter if you ranked whatever in the world, we treat everyone the same. Yeah, look, the knock-on effect has been significant because we're 3 weeks. We pushed the whole schedule, the entire calendar out by 3 weeks. We had to work closely with the ATP, the men's tour, and the WTA, the women's tour, to ensure that we have those events that are affected get another opportunity to play another time of the year. Where we have been helped is most of the events have actually been postponed or cancelled. Where you see what's happening in the United States and Europe right now, it's very difficult to run any kind of sporting event. So that's something that has helped the calendar. But I think the tours have done a remarkable job on delivering what they've have delivered under this current environment. But it has been another reason why we're making this announcement today, is because it's taken a bit of time to work through with everyone. We've impacted 19 events, so working with each of them has been important. At the end of the day, it is the Grand Slam, so the players and the tennis community want the Grand Slam to go ahead. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thank you.